Starting today, the true owner of this house is me. Nicole's words sliced through the cheerful clamor of the Christmas party like a shard of glass. In an instant, laughter vanished, and only the crackling of the fireplace filled the silence, louder than before. Confused stares from my friends pierced into me. When I looked toward my husband, Scott, seeking some kind of help, he only stared awkwardly into his glass of red wine. Just minutes ago, everything had been perfect. After working endlessly day and night as a freelance designer, I had finally grasped my dream. Our first Christmas in this house with the large bay window, surrounded by the people I loved. The turkey lined up on the kitchen counter, the sparkling tree, the smiles of our friends. All of it had seemed like proof that my hard work had finally paid off. A perfect, too perfect night. And maybe that's why I had been quietly waiting for the moment when that illusion of perfection would finally shatter. Now, Nicole stood before me, a devilish smile curling her lips. "Hey, Jenny, did you really think this house belonged to you? How pitiful." The way she said my name, so sweet it could have been honey yet as cold as a blade, made my skin crawl. Slowly, savoring each word as if tormenting her prey, she continued, "Sorry, but the game's over. I already had Scott sign the deed." "What?" I pretended not to understand. As alarms blared in my mind, Nicole looked down at me, delivering the final blow. "If you don't like it, you can just leave. Not only this house, leave our family." The air in the room froze completely. This wasn't a cruel joke. The night that was supposed to be the happiest of my life had just been transformed into hell by the cruelest betrayal imaginable. At least, that's what they thought. Nicole's words hung in the air like a death sentence. Bathed in the sympathetic or curious gazes of everyone around me, I barely managed to stay standing. Everyone seemed to be waiting for me to collapse in tears or start screaming hysterically. So I did exactly what they expected. Quivering lips, wide eyes, speechless and broken by the scene before me. But inside, my mind was perfectly calm. As if I were standing in the eye of a storm, the noise around me sounded distant and dull. Ah, it's finally here. I had been preparing for this day for a long time. Nicole's triumphant face, Scott's guilty silence, the confused, innocent looks of our family. All of it sounded to me like the final click of a puzzle piece falling into place. Of course, that didn't mean my heart didn't ache. For a brief moment, an image of the little Nicole from our childhood flashed through my mind. The adorable girl who used to follow behind me, smiling brightly and saying, "I want to be just like you, Jenny." We used to share secrets and talk about our dreams for the future. When did she start wanting what was mine? When did she start envying my happiness? And Scott, where did that gentle smile go? The one that used to praise my designs more than anyone else when we first met? I had known about their betrayal for weeks. I'll never forget that night when I read the private investigator's report, and my heart turned to ice. So what I felt then wasn't sorrow, nor anger. It was something colder, harder, something you could call resolve. There was no need to make a scene. I decided to simply walk away without saying a word. To them, it would look like surrender. But to me, it was the spark of counterattack. Everything began. Yes, it all began on that radiant day when I signed the contract for this dream house. The gears started to turn out of place about a year ago. I had poured nearly all my savings into the house, paying for it in cash. Scott was hesitant, saying it was too soon to buy and even refused to put down a deposit. But I couldn't give up on my dream, so I pushed the deal forward anyway. When the purchase finally went through, I was overjoyed. I believed Scott would love it once he saw it himself. That weekend, I invited Nicole over right away. The moment she arrived, she ran through the house like an excited child. "Paying in full with cash? That's so you, Jenny. It's absolutely beautiful." Then, leaning against the big bay window, she turned and gave me a mischievous smile. "Hey, maybe I should just take this house for myself." "Just kidding." I laughed and said, "Oh, stop it." But for a split second, a chill ran down my spine. Because Nicole's eyes weren't laughing at all. There was nothing playful in them, only a cold gleam, as if she were appraising something she intended to take. Next to her, Scott gave an awkward little laugh. "Ha ha ha," and quickly looked away. I pretended not to notice the strange tension that flickered through the room. That night I said to Scott, "Didn't Nicole seem a little unsettling today? Even for a joke?" But he brushed it off easily. "You're overthinking it. It was just a joke. She's always been like that, hasn't she? He didn't even look at me, just kept scrolling on his phone. I couldn't say anything more. Still, the look in Nicole's eyes that day stayed with me, like a tiny thorn buried deep in my chest. And that thorn, over time, began to fester, slowly spreading the poison of suspicion through my heart. Nicole began showing up at the house more and more often, saying things like, "If it were me, I'd do it this way," acting as if the place already belonged to her. Each time, Scott would take her side. "She just has a good eye for design," he'd say. Little by little, in the home I had dreamed of and worked so hard to earn, I began to feel completely isolated. Nicole's interference escalated day by day. At first, it was harmless comments about the interior decor, but the moment she crossed a line was when I walked into my own bedroom one afternoon. Nicole was there, standing by my bed, tossing my cherished bed cover onto the floor and trying to replace it with a gaudy new one. "What are you doing?" My voice came out colder than I expected. Nicole turned around, unbothered, and smiled. "Oh, Jenny, this room was just so dull. I thought it could use a little more flair." I locked the door. "How did you even get in?" When I pressed her, she replied casually, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. "The key? Oh, Scott gave me a spare, so I can help out whenever I want." For a moment, it felt like someone had trampled through something sacred, something that was supposed to belong only to Scott and me. Rage and disbelief surged through me like fire. That night, I confronted him. "Why did you give Nicole a spare key? She came into our bedroom." He sighed, clearly annoyed. "She's just trying to help, Jenny. Maybe you should be a little more grateful to your sister." His phone buzzed on the table, and I caught a glimpse of the screen. Nicole's name flashed across it. He hurriedly flipped it over. That was the moment the alarm inside me began to scream. This wasn't kindness. It was something else entirely. The seeds of doubt that had taken root in me began to sprout at terrifying speed. The strange glances between them, the whispered conversations that stopped when I entered the room, the way Scott never let go of his phone anymore. Each tiny inconsistency began to connect, forming a single damning line. And then came the final proof, delivered by mail. One day, an unfamiliar envelope arrived in the mailbox from a law office I didn't recognize. It was addressed to Scott. I hesitated, but it looked important, so I opened it. Inside was a single notice: acknowledgement of filing, quitclaim deed. When I read the attached copy of the deed, my body went numb. It stated that I, Jenny, was transferring full ownership of this house to Nicole, and on the line for the grantor's signature, there was my name. A perfect imitation. A forgery. I stood frozen in the living room, gripping the fake deed in my hands. Before anger, there was only coldness, an icy wave that swept through me. This wasn't some petty family dispute. This was a crime, a calculated act to steal my life itself. Every instinct in me screamed to confront Scott, to make him confess everything right then and there. But reason, sharp, cold, merciless, held me back. If I exploded then, they would know that I'd found out. And then they'd become even more careful, more secretive. I couldn't afford to lose this advantage. With trembling hands, I photographed the document, then carefully placed the original back into its envelope. I slipped it to the bottom of Scott's mail pile as if nothing had happened. That night, when he came home, I greeted him with a calm, "Welcome back." My heart felt ready to burst, but my face was the picture of composure, my perfect mask. While he showered, I slipped into his study to make sure the envelope was still there. It hadn't been thrown away. He still didn't know that I had seen it. Alone in the bedroom, I finally let out the breath I'd been holding. Tears streamed down my face. Tears of betrayal and of the crushing loneliness of realizing I would have to fight this battle completely alone. But there was no time to cry. I needed an ally, someone I could truly trust. At dawn, I called my closest friend from college, Candace. Sitting across from me at the cafe, Candace listened quietly as I told her everything. When I showed Candace the copy of the document with trembling hands, her expression darkened. "Jenny, this isn't normal. Absolutely not." She leaned forward over the table. "Scott and Nicole are definitely up to something. But if you let emotions take over, you'll lose. What you need now is evidence. Solid evidence." Her words cut through the haze in my mind like light through fog. Right. This wasn't the time to cry. I had to fight, for my home and for my life. What should I do? I asked. Candace answered firmly. First, find a lawyer, and then bring in a professional. A professional? Yes, a private investigator. If you want to catch them, you need someone who knows how. Those words became the final push I needed to make up my mind. Following Candace's advice, I moved quickly. Through her referral, I contacted an attorney named Tiffany Owen, said to be one of the best in her field, and explained everything. Over the phone, Tiffany listened carefully before speaking in a calm, steady tone. We'll begin the investigation immediately. Don't get emotional. Keep pretending you don't know anything. That's the best way to protect yourself. Her words brought me a small sense of relief. Next, Tiffany introduced me to a reputable investigative agency, and I hired a private detective. The task was simple but crucial. Follow Scott and Nicole. Find out when and where they met, and uncover any fraudulent activity connected to the transfer of the house. It wasn't cheap, but if I wanted my life back, it was a necessary investment. And so began my double life. Inside the house, I continued to play the role of the oblivious wife. I pretended not to notice Scott's lies or the way Nicole let herself in with her spare key to meddle with my things. They seemed convinced that I was cornered, helpless. That illusion worked perfectly in my favor. Outside the house, however, I was quietly building my counterattack. Every few days, reports from the investigator arrived in my inbox. Each one calmly, methodically documented a new layer of betrayal. The first report included photos. Scott and Nicole entering a hotel together in the middle of a weekday. I had suspected as much, but seeing the evidence, cold, undeniable, felt like a knife twisting in my chest. A tear fell onto the report, but I wiped it away immediately. This wasn't something to cry over. This was a weapon, proof of their guilt. And that was only the beginning. The investigator had also captured photos of Scott handing Nicole a stack of papers, documents he had apparently taken from my personal safe. According to the report, they included my bank balance statements, detailed investment portfolios, and, worst of all, a copy of the original purchase contract for the house. They were mapping out my entire financial life, gathering everything they needed to legally strip me of power. Rage shook my entire body, but I buried it deep inside. Not yet. The time wasn't right. The reports continued to reveal more of their vile scheme, notes showing Scott practicing my signature and evidence of Nicole meeting with a shady lawyer known for handling real estate fraud. With every new piece of information, the puzzle grew clearer and darker. Then, unexpectedly, a powerful new ally appeared. My childhood friend, Rebecca. She worked in the county recorder's office, and I had confided in her the same night I told Candace everything. Worried for me, Rebecca offered to keep an eye out, within legal limits, for anything unusual. A few days later, she called me during her lunch break, her voice tight with urgency. "Jenny, we need to meet, right away." We met at a cafe near my office. Under the table, she slid a folded document toward me. "Jenny, look at this." It was a copy of the property title transfer application that Nicole had filed through her attorney with the county. It was identical to the one I'd seen in Scott's mail, except this copy bore the official acceptance stamp from the clerk's office. Their plan was already in its final stage. "But here's the strange part," Rebecca said quietly, lowering her voice. "This document includes a notary's signature, but when I checked the notary's registration number in our system, nothing came up. It doesn't exist, which means it's almost certainly forged." Her words felt like a blessing from above, the circumstantial evidence the investigator had gathered, now reinforced by an official statement. Together, they formed an ironclad weapon that could expose their entire fraud. "Rebecca, thank you. Really, I'm so sorry for putting you at risk." "What are you saying? We're friends, aren't we?" She gripped my hand tightly. "Don't lose, Jenny, no matter what." Her friendship lit a warm flame inside me, a light in the long, lonely battle I'd been fighting. Almost all the pieces were in place. All that was left was to see when they would make their final move. The information Rebecca provided was the last piece of the puzzle. The detective's photos of Scott and Nicole's secret meetings, the proof that my personal information had been stolen, and the undeniable evidence of document forgery that Rebecca had uncovered. When I handed everything over to my attorney, Tiffany, she said quietly but with absolute conviction, "This is perfect. In Tiffany's office, we arranged all the evidence in chronological order and reconstructed the full scope of their plan. It was far more calculated and malicious than I had ever imagined. Their scheme had begun a year earlier. Nicole had intended from the very start to make my house her own. She seduced Scott and turned him into her accomplice. And the final stage was the theft of ownership, using a forged property transfer deed. Their goal was to complete all the legal procedures while I remained unaware, so that by the time I realized what had happened, it would already be too late. And when would they make their move? The answer lay in the latest report from the detective. It contained an audio recording, captured during one of Nicole and Scott's restaurant meetings. The Christmas party will be the perfect chance. Nicole's voice was clear and sharp. Everyone will be there, family, friends. Once Jenny's humiliated in front of them all, she'll lose the will to fight back. She'll probably run out of the house crying. Scott murmured something, but Nicole cut him off. Don't worry, the paperwork's already been processed. That night we'll be the real stars of the show. When I heard that recording, everything fell into place. They hadn't chosen the Christmas party just to corner me legally. They wanted to destroy me socially, to erase me. I could feel my blood boiling, but I turned calmly to Tiffany and said, please, make them understand the full weight of their crimes, down to their bones. The days leading up to the Christmas party felt like walking a tightrope stretched endlessly through the air. With their plan entering its final phase, Scott and Nicole had grown completely careless. Their behavior became bolder each day, sometimes spilling into open psychological attacks. Nicole came to the house every day under the pretense of helping with party preparations, deliberately repeating actions meant to irritate me. Jenny, isn't this tablecloth a little dull? Maybe you should pick something more stylish. Oh, this dish tastes kind of bland. Should I redo it for you? She acted as though she already owned the house. Following Tiffany's advice, I simply smiled and replied, thanks, letting everything slide off me. Scott, too, found new ways to wound me. Nicole's so thoughtful. Compared to her, He'd sigh dramatically, making sure I saw the contempt in his eyes. He truly believed I was an oblivious, pitiful wife. And that illusion gave him a cruel sense of superiority. But instead of weakening my resolve, their behavior only sharpened it. Still, the hardest part was what they did behind my back, manipulating my family and friends. Nicole had been calling my parents and relatives one by one, days before the party. She's been spending too much money on the house lately. I'm worried about her. Maybe the stress from work is making her a little unstable. She wept as she said it, apparently. By pretending to be concerned, she'd successfully planted the idea that if something went wrong at the party, it would all be due to my emotional instability or poor judgment. When several relatives called, tentatively asking, "Are you okay?" I was seized by the urge to shout everything out. But each time I called Candace and Rebecca instead. They anchored me when I was about to lose control. Just hold on, Jenny. The more lies they pile up, the harder they'll crash when it all comes down. Her words kept me steady, so I waited quietly for the moment to come. On the night of the final showdown, the curtain rose on the stage filled with their lies and deceit. And finally, the Christmas party arrived. The fire in the fireplace, the twinkling lights on the tree, the laughter of friends. The place that had once felt like the peak of my happiness became a silent battlefield. I discreetly touched my dress pocket to make sure the recorder was on. Nicole tapped her glass with a spoon, drawing everyone's attention to herself. She looked around the guests with a satisfied smile, then delivered her words exactly as planned. Starting today, the real owner of this house is me. The room fell utterly silent. As my friends looked on in shock, I turned toward my parents. But in their eyes, before any trace of concern, there was only pity and judgment, as if saying, just as Nicole said. The lies Nicole had planted beforehand had completely clouded their judgment. Nicole sensed the shift in the air and decided to strike again. I already had Scott sign the deed. If you have a problem with that, you can leave. Not just this house, but this family. I was surrounded on all sides. It was exactly the scene they'd been waiting for. I stood there as if struck silent by shock, just as they expected me to. My lips trembled, and I made it look as though I was desperately fighting back tears. A victorious smile curled on Nicole's lips. That was enough. I didn't say a word. I didn't scream. I didn't curse. I simply turned my back on them, quietly, deliberately. Then I picked up my handbag and began walking toward the front door. To everyone watching, it must have looked like the pathetic retreat of a broken woman who had lost everything. Jenny! Candace's voice rang out, filled with pain. But behind her perfect performance, for the benefit of Nicole and Scott, I heard a faint note only I could understand. Her eyes were saying, "Stick to the plan." Carrying that silent encouragement on my back, I placed my hand on the doorknob. The moment I stepped outside, I pulled out my phone and sent a single text to Tiffany, who was waiting. "Please." After I stormed out, or rather pretended to, I quietly slipped back through the kitchen door and hid in the shadows. Tiffany had advised me beforehand. Watch it all unfold with your own eyes. That's how you'll truly find closure. She was right. This ending wouldn't mean anything unless I saw it, and heard it, for myself. 15 minutes after my disappearance, just as Nicole was about to pop open a bottle of champagne in celebration, the cheerful party atmosphere was shattered by a loud, urgent knock at the front door. Scott went to open it. 2 police officers stood on the doorstep. From my hiding place in the kitchen, I watched intently. When they called Nicole's name, the living room froze. Whispers spread among the guests. "Police? What's happening?" Until the air grew heavy with tension. Playing the perfect victim, Nicole shrieked, "This must be a mistake." But when one of the officers said calmly, "You're under arrest for suspicion of document forgery," her triumphant smile vanished instantly. "This isn't real. Tell them it's not real, Scott." I watched coldly as Nicole, handcuffed, turned to Scott in desperation. "This is your fault. You said you'd take care of everything." Nicole struggled wildly, revealing the true nature she had kept hidden all along, and began lashing out at Scott. The same parents and relatives who had believed her lies just moments earlier could only stand pale and speechless. And in the midst of that chaos, Tiffany, the lawyer, appeared quietly. She clearly announced to everyone gathered that I was the rightful owner of the house and that the deed Nicole had presented was a forgery. As my parents and relatives stood there in stunned silence, Tiffany paused briefly before continuing. And the deception didn't end with the house. She turned on her tablet and projected a series of photos on the screen for everyone to see. The first image showed Scott and Nicole, arm in arm, walking boldly into a hotel in broad daylight. Then, swipe after swipe, came more photos. The 2 of them leaning close in a cafe, kissing in a parked car, laughing together as if the world belonged to them. Each image struck like a hammer, a ruthless, undeniable unveiling of their sins. My mother let out a strangled cry and collapsed in tears. My father, face contorted with fury and shame, turned away. "What a disgrace," he muttered. Finally, Tiffany handed 2 documents to Scott, who stood there hollow-eyed as if his soul had left his body. "These are the divorce papers and a formal notice of damages from Jenny," she said evenly. Scott's trembling hands took the papers. He sank to his knees, whispering the same words over and over. "It's over. It's all over." That was when I stepped out from the shadows. My footsteps echoed in the frozen silence. "Jenny?" Nicole, still in handcuffs, stared at me in disbelief. Scott looked up, his eyes filled with fear and despair. The guests could only stare, stunned into silence. I stood before the 2 of them and said, clearly, calm but firm, "Surprised? Did you really think I ran away?" Nicole's face was drained of color. "Sorry to disappoint you, Nicole, but your little scheme, every step of it, has been in my hands from the very beginning." I laid the thick folder of evidence Tiffany had prepared on the table. "You worked hard this past year, I'll give you that. But while you were busy deceiving me, I was watching you. Hiring detectives, consulting lawyers, gathering every piece of proof I needed." Scott opened his mouth. "Jenny, I raised my hand sharply to cut him off. I don't want to hear a single excuse." Then I turned to face my parents, who stood frozen. "Mom, Dad, you believed Nicole's lies and abandoned me. The consequences of that choice are right here before your eyes." My mother tried to say something, but no words came. She simply broke down in tears. When the officers moved to take Nicole away, she shouted one last desperate insult. "This house doesn't suit someone like you, always acting like you're perfect, pretending to be better than everyone else." I smiled faintly. "You're right, but this house is mine. Not just legally, but because I protected it with my own hands. And now it's a place you'll never reach again. Nicole fell silent, glaring at me with hatred as the officers let her out. Scott, still clutching the papers, staggered to his feet and left quietly, without anyone seeing him off. The guests who remained in the living room looked stunned, like survivors of a storm. I took a deep breath and said softly, "Everyone, I'm sorry for the disturbance. The party is over. Please go home." One by one, they left awkwardly until only Candace and Rebecca remained. "Jenny," Candace said, pulling me into a hug. "You did it. You really did." Rebecca, her eyes glistening with tears, added, "You're stronger than anyone I know, Jenny. Truly strong." Supported by their friendship, I finally exhaled a long, trembling breath of relief. Everything had gone according to plan. My battle was over. Nicole was formally charged with document forgery, a serious criminal offense. The trial ended with a guilty verdict and a suspended sentence, marking her record with a stain that would never be erased. The friends who once adored her turned their backs, and even her parents and relatives who had once scolded me refused to help her. I later heard that her relationship with Scott had also fallen apart. They blamed each other for everything, ending in mutual hatred and disgrace. The divorce with Scott went surprisingly smoothly, thanks to Tiffany. The evidence of his betrayal was undeniable. Not only did he have to pay compensation, but the court also ruled that since he hadn't contributed a cent to buying the house, nearly all the assets would go to me. He lost the comfortable life and wealth I had built, left with nothing but debt, and eventually disappeared from town. After everything settled, my parents called to apologize. I declined, politely but firmly. They had chosen not to see the truth. I couldn't bring myself to see them as family anymore. A few weeks later, I returned to the house alone. Candace and Rebecca had cleaned up all the Christmas decorations beautifully. Sitting by the fireplace, watching the flames quietly dance, I let the memories of the past year wash over me. I lost much, but I have gained even more. I didn't sell the house. This is my home, my fortress, the place I defended with my own strength. A house that was once a stage for betrayal has become a space filled with warmth, laughter, and memories shared with people I truly trust. My new life begins here.